The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Doug Jenzen, who's an award-winning Executive Director of the Guadalupe Dune Center. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. I can't wait to share your story, share about the Dune Center. I know so many incredible, wonderful things are happening there, but what I'd like to do is roll back time and talk first about your childhood. I know you're a local guy, and so let's talk about growing up, what schools you attended, a little bit about your family back then.
Yeah, I grew up down the road in the Pomo. You know, as a kid, I was a lot more rural back then, and so you know, grew up catching lizards and chasing frogs, and we spent a lot of time at Oso Flaco Lake and Rancho Guadalupe Beach, and I think that's really how I started to develop an appreciation for nature and the world around us, and all the things that make our area unique.
So loving the local beauty, loving history, I know, and the environment, and I think just an appreciation, it sounds like, for your environment and where you live and displaying that for people. All comes into the work that you do now. So what schools did you attend growing up?
I went to elementary schools in the Pomo, so in the Pomo Elementary and Dana Elementary. Then Paulding and Arroyo Grande High School, because there weren't that many schools in the Pomo at the time. And then from Arroyo Grande High School, I went to Hancock College. Fantastic.
And what did you study when you went to Hancock College?
Probably like a lot of college students, I switched majors quite a few times. For a while, I did political science, but ended up falling into history.
Falling into history. And before we leave the topic of childhood, I want to ask, since we are an educational institution of Santa Barbara County Education Office, how were you? Describe yourself as a student. Would you say you were eager learner? You were. How would you describe?
So I had an amazing childhood. I was fortunate in that my family valued education. Interestingly enough, my grandmother, after World War II, instead of my grandfather using the GI Bill to go to college, my grandmother did.
Is that right?
So she was the only female in her political science program at USC, and so when I was growing up, my grandmother made sure that we all did well in school, and every summer we took road trips around the country, and we always visited museums, and it was just kind of this instilled value.
Wow, that's really great. Thanks for sharing that. Your grandmother, a leader, always sounds like for your
a woman
family.
Before her time.
That's
yeah.
right. That's wonderful. Okay, so you went to Hancock College, eventually studied history, and from Hancock, did you go into a different college, or did you start work right away?
I went to work. Money is always appealing. I ended up working at Borders, the bookstore, and their specialty retail division, and it was a great experience in that I learned real life skills, things like business forecasts and budgets and human resources skills, and around my mid to late 20s, I decided that that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I went back to school and ended up finishing my bachelor's degree, getting a teaching credential, and getting a master's degree.
Wow, where was that? Where did you go back to school?
First Cal State Channel Islands, and then Cal Poly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So after finishing school, actually having that interesting kind of a stop in Borders and retail, I know talking offline, we talked about the multiple different branches Borders had, and in fact, you were in charge of many of those little branches that you did. So
so Borders also owned Walden Books, and then all of those kiosks that you see in the middle of the malls, like counter kiosks. At one point, I was running Lego stores, and it all required a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and creativity.
Interesting. And were you always located in the Central Coast, or were you traveling?
In some form or another. For a while, my region was the area between Monterey and San Francisco and part of the East Bay. So I was a road warrior for a while. Yeah.
So then when you did go back to college, you got your teaching credential, master's degree. What did you do after that?
So kind of backing up a little bit, one day working at the bookstore in Santa Cruz, I opened up this box and found this really neat book with a sepia colored photograph on the front of Santa Cruz, the beach in the 20s. And I thought, oh, this is a cool book. I stuck it at the cash register, and we sold all the copies within an hour or so.
Wow.
So when I finished my master's degree and decided that it would be beneficial to get published, I ended up contacting that publishing company and saying, hey, I'm in the Pomo now. There's this really famous photo that was taken here. Would you be interested in publishing a book about the town? And they wrote back to me within a couple hours and said, sure. The most famous photograph in world history was taken there. Let's do this.
So describe for the audience who are watching today, they're just on the edges of their seat wondering, what is that photo again? Will you remind everyone the photo, and then will you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, so the photo is the migrant mother photo that Dorothea Lange took in the 30s when she worked for the federal government, the different branches of the federal government over time.
And I'm going to interrupt you here because a moment ago you said you called the people that you called, and they said the most famous photograph was taken here. So I know you know the here.
Yeah,
Where
in the Pomo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's famous for lots of reasons. I mean, one, it's a great photo. It's pretty much used in every history textbook when they're describing the Great Depression.
Right.
But because it was taken for the federal government, it's public domain. So that's one of the reasons it's so widely used around the world. I've seen it in Poland, and a lot of people use it for different political, points they're trying to make, and it's yeah.
I love the connection that you made from being in the retail business, pulling out that book, and then coming here now and saying, that reminds me of the picture, and then it really paved a path for your book to be published. So then tell us about that book.
Yeah, so it's part of that same series. It's put out by Arcadia Publishing. The series is called Images of America, and a lot of different towns have them. They all have a sepia-colored photo on the front, but I created this one for Napomo, and the publishing company requires you to have 200 historical photos in the book. And at the time, that seemed like a really daunting task. So I contacted all the local historical societies in the Dana Adobe and the Pomo, and I said, hey, can you help me out? And the Dana Adobe in particular, because of the restoration of the house that they were trying to do at the time, I said, I'll donate the royalties to you if you help me out. So they said, sure. So we pulled together all these photos and published this book. They ended up hiring me. We had a book signing party that lasted 2 hours, and we sold 300 books in that amount of time, because all these families that are in the book, they wanted the book because their families were in it, and so they were buying stacks of them.
Yeah.
So I got my signature down real quick.
I love it. I love it. Well, you talked about, or you showed the history, but it was also very current because the families are living. They're living here. The homes are here. The Adobes of the past are theirs. So you were really featuring so many aspects of what you love. We talked about earlier: environment, the landscape, the history, the people, the culture.
Yeah, and this book that I didn't think would sell that many copies turned out to be incredibly relevant, not just here, but friends of mine who take road trips around the country, they've seen them for sale in Oklahoma because of the connection with the migration during the Depression.
I love that. Thanks for sharing all of those connections, of which you have many in your life, I think. There really are. I think where you are today is built up on connections that you've had in the past. So let's talk about where you are today as Executive Director of the Guadalupe Dune Center, and how did you get there? Let's make sure we understand the path that brought you to the center.
Yeah, so I had been working at the Dan Adobe for about a year as their programs director, so I managed all the educational programs that they did for elementary school kids relating to early California history. And about a year into it, the Dune Center contacted me, and they were looking for someone to revitalize the organization. One of the interesting things about the recession we went through is it kind of forced a lot of people and a lot of organizations to look in the mirror and say, okay, how do we make this more efficient? How do we revamp our organization? So they contacted me. I agreed to do it, which in hindsight was kind of crazy because the organization really wasn't doing that well. But I pulled together all of the skills I had learned through business management and education and in the nonprofit world, and rebooted the organization. We sold off excess real estate. I wrote another book in the same series about Guadalupe. It turned out Dorothea Lange had been in Guadalupe as well, and so we had all these great photos of that town. And 2 weeks after I was hired was the first excavation of the DeMille movie set site in the dunes. So it was just bam, right off the bat, hit the ground running, and tried to really work on the organization's image in the community, refine the educational programs, and remodel the museum.
Fantastic. We want to definitely talk about that museum right now. But let's start with that 2 weeks on the job, that excavation. What was found and what is there now?
Yeah, so in 1923, the largest movie set ever built was built at our local dunes. And it was large, and nothing that large has been built since because it was created at a time when there weren't any special effects.
Okay.
After that, special effects started happening. You didn't need to necessarily build something life-size because of depth of field and camera technology.
Perhaps because of that large site and not wanting to do that again.
Correct.
Yeah,
they were way over budget. But they built this 12-story tall movie set. It was 720 feet wide. I mean, it was essentially life-size to Egypt.
Wow.
And DeMille left it behind. Lots of theories why. We have photos from the 20s and 30s of people posing with these strange Sphinx statues out in the dunes. But after about the 30s, they disappear.
Okay.
And in 1983, NYU film student read DeMille's biography, and DeMille said he hoped that archaeologists someday didn't think Egyptian civilization extended to the Pacific because of this movie set he left behind. So Peter Brosnan went on this hunt, tracked down Guadalupe. He dubbed it the Lost City, but it was really only lost to people outside of Guadalupe because all the locals knew where it was. They were extras on the film when it was made.
Interesting.
So it's because of permitting and real estate changing hands, it took Peter about 30 years to go through the process of getting this movie set excavated, and it happened to be at the same time that I was hired.
Wow, very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And there's so many other exciting things to see and do when you're at the center. You were talking about an interactive sandbox of some sort. Can you share with the audience about that? Because it feels like it's, or it might be actually the one at all that's around in its existence around here.
Yeah. So it turns out sand is way more interesting than you would ever imagine. So for example, we have augmented reality sandbox built by Hancock College students, and they used a piece of an Xbox and an LCD projector and a computer so that the projector projects a topographic map onto the sandbox, and as you move the sand, it changes in real time. So it teaches kids about geography, topography, water runoff.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we also have sand from around the world. it's pretty fascinating that the size of a grain of sand tells you how old a beach is. The color tells you the minerals that are locally prevalent. And so what we've done is just all this random sand that people have brought us, we've attached QR codes to it.
Wow.
And you can scan it with your phone, or we have an iPad, and it connects you to Google Maps and pinpoints exactly where the sand came from, and there's photos. So what's great about this, especially for kids in like Guadalupe who maybe don't have access to technology, they get to interact with technology at the same time as getting a geology and geography lesson.
Fantastic.
So it's fun when kids come in not knowing a place exists and they leave wanting to go to Aruba.
Right. They found sand from around the world. And I understand that you just traveled not around the world, but in the world, and you actually brought some sand back as well. That, and I think you actually saw the real Sphinx out in the world. So tell us about those experiences.
Yeah, so after our big Sphinx unveiling in July, I decided I wanted to see the original Sphinx. So to kind of bring it full circle, I went and saw the Sphinx statue and scooped up some sand for our sand exhibit of the site where the original Sphinx is.
What's the comparison? Can you give us
your
take?
It's funny. I showed our tour guide a photo of me with the Sphinx here, and he said, "Wow, where's that Sphinx?" And I said, "Oh, California." He said, "What's it doing there?" So he actually couldn't tell the difference between.
Is that right?
Yeah, a authentic Egyptian artifact and the movie set.
That's really fantastic. Yeah. That's really fantastic that you could experience that, bring back the sand, have that picture. I mean, so many connections, as we said. I think that's a big theme for us today. So when a person were to drive drive to the dunes, I mean, there are the dunes, there's a center. Can you say a little bit more about the facility, and then we'll talk about some other areas around your work as well.
So the dunes themselves are 18 miles, and I think something around 20,000 acres. And it's a vast stretch of sand, unlike anything really that's left on the West Coast, because previously sand dunes weren't seen as valuable. So in the 40s and 50s, they were zoned industrial use. LAX used to be sand dunes, and now there's an airport on top of it because people didn't see the value of it.
Right.
So what that means is what we have here is unique and special now. So in 1996, a group of citizens got together with the Nature Conservancy and decided to start this educational facility in Guadalupe with the intention of helping improve educational attainment rates in the city, as well as improving the local economy through tourism. Okay. So that's why it's located in Guadalupe, and so we have the mandate of educating the public about the sand dunes and nature.
Great. Well, let's talk then about some of the education that the dunes and the center provides to student groups. I'm sure this could be a topic for a real lengthy conversation, but maybe an overview or some of the ways in which there's outreach or even students coming into the center.
Yeah, so our educational programs are the thing that our organization values the most. We engage anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 children a year, and that's with a staff of 3 people and a volunteer base of 180.
Wow.
So we couldn't do this without our donors and volunteers. We offer programs everywhere between Lompoc and San Luis Obispo, so it's regional. And we deliver things like in-class programs on a range of topics that support typical school day learning. We do free after-school programs, so we design enrichment activities in conjunction with the Boys and Girls Club in 2 counties, the YMCA, ACES. We work with them and deliver programs at their site so that kids can continue learning after the school day is over. And then we do field trips to the beach. So kids, which just kind of informal surveys we've done, about half the kids we work with have never been to the beach because they come from agricultural families where the farmers, bus the parents to the farms, and if they don't have cars, there's no access to the beach. So something I've learned through this job is the beach is actually a luxury item that I've taken for granted my life.
Yeah.
So and without that connection to the environment or nature, you're less likely to appreciate it. So it really is important for kids to get out there and see what's amazing about the world, so that they can take care of it. Even if it's just picking up trash.
Right. Right. This is making me think about where we started in the conversation, which you said you grew up in Nipomo and you're out catching lizards and being out in nature and really having this really idyllic, in a way, you know, childhood where you were out and playing. And as you were describing students coming to the center and going out to the beach, it makes me think about how your organization is providing an experience for the students, much like you as a child did too.
Yeah, one of the programs I'm most proud of during my tenure with the Dune Center so far, we call it Explore the Coast, and it's named after a grant program from the Coastal Conservancy. The Coastal Conservancy actually decided to fund us again this year. So we're going to do a semester-length program for every 5th grade student at Mary Buren Elementary School in Guadalupe.
Fantastic.
And what's great about it is the first place we take the kids is the Monterey Bay Aquarium, so they can see what lives in the ocean. We take them to the Channel Islands, which is magnificent to see all these kids on a boat for the first time. And they learn about adaptation, food chains, and watersheds. And then we end up back at our local beach where they actually pick up trash and plant native plants as a mini restoration project. And it's supposed to be a life-changing experience for these kids that both, you know, creates an empathy for the world as well as hopefully improves their standardized test scores.
Right. Fantastic experience for students, and I feel like your teaching credential that you earned is coming right into play as an executive director of the Dune Center for sure, and supporting students' learning. Before we leave the educational programs, and again, there's so many, and we talked about just a few, but I believe that there are some summer programs available as well. So when the school year ends, there's opportunities for students during the summer?
Yeah, so we typically during the summer we focus on oceanography. And it's kind of different than the rest of the school year because all these other organizations that we collaborate with have their own schedules. So sometimes it's compacted into 3 weeks, sometimes it's over 3 months, but it's always about oceans. So actually just a few weeks ago, we had 130 kids from the San Luis Obispo South County Boys and Girls Club come in. And because of the size of our building, it's kind of funny to see these kids just cycling through in groups. And it was the first time we've tested our new exhibits in that way.
Is that right?
So it turns out we've done really well.
Good.
Yeah,
That's great.
They stood up.
they did well.
Yeah, we learned that you can clean crayon off iPads.
The lessons learned, right? Yeah, that's great. For viewers who are watching right now, they might not have known the reach that the Dune Center has on students both in Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County. So on behalf of the educational community, I just wanted to pause and say thank you for all that you're doing to support students, not only experiences, but truly learning, because I know that that's a focus, as you said, in terms of the organization. So I'm going to turn a corner and talk a little bit about work that we haven't discussed yet, and that is on the Santa Barbara County Arts Commission. You represent 5th District.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about what the commission does and your role on that commission?
Yeah, so the Santa Barbara County Arts Commission promotes public art in the unincorporated areas of Santa Barbara County. There's a program called Percent for the Art, and so anytime there's a public project that gets built, 1% of the budget is supposed to go to public art. And so, for example, the big mural on the back of the county building on the corner of Betaravia and Miller, that was funded through the Percent for Art program. And it's really about, it's more than just art. It's about improving the quality of life for everybody that lives here. You know, not everyone in this area is well-to-do or, you know, can afford trips to urban and affluent areas, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve to have access to the arts. So I'm a big believer in arts in our community. I'm the chair of the County Art and Public Places Committee, and so we approve the exhibits that go on display in the county buildings. There's galleries both in the South County office and the Betaravia Center up here, and so we just make sure that everyone has access to the art.
And in public places, so would that include murals that are out in communities? We see so many here in North County. They're beautiful in different communities.
Yeah, so that's often the case is through the Arts Commission, but the Dune Center actually just worked with the Squire Foundation, which is based in Santa Barbara, again, to provide access to public art in the county. But what we did was we worked with the Squire Foundation to put a mural on the former Far Western Tavern building in Guadalupe. And so it's something that the 5 million people that drive up and down Highway 1 every year is going to be able to see now.
I love that mural.
Oh, thank
I think
you.
it's wonderful. I was in Guadalupe recently, took a picture and sent it out because I thought this is really incredible. Big heart, right? Small town.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes? Yes.
Yep. Small town, big heart.
Big heart. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you for putting that there because it really, and working on the commission to provide art in the public, in the community, because it really does make a difference. It really does. It makes you pause and appreciate the community in which we live.
Exactly. You know, some might argue that it's just aesthetics, but aesthetics really affects the value of the quality of our life.
That's right. I want to talk a little bit about something you've mentioned indirectly, but multiple times through our conversation, and that has to do with partnerships. I mean, clearly you're a partner with educational systems, you're a partner with and need external entities to help support funding. But tell us about the power of partnerships that you truly do believe in and need.
There's no way the Dune Center could have the impact that it has without the partnerships and that we have with other organizations in the community.
That's great. And are you running a capital campaign right now for the Dune Center, or is that happening all the time?
Well, so we're in constant fundraising mode, whether it's for the new exhibits or the movie set excavation. You know, the movie set excavation, every time we go out there, it's $150,000. So we've just about finished with that. We have a nearly complete Sphinx, but in order to put the Sphinx back together, we need a larger space. And it turns out that the former owners of the Far Western Tavern, Clarence Minetti, was an extra in the Ten Commandments film when it was filmed in the 20s.
Right?
Yes.
Wow.
And the family actually did a lot of the catering for the actors and extras. That building was also a hotel that the actors and extras stayed at when they were in town filming. So there's this connection between the movie set and the Far Western Tavern, formerly the Palace Hotel. So the Minetti family decided to donate the building to us. We're supposed to be in what's called the silent phase, where nobody knows about the capital campaign, but it's the worst kept secret because everyone's talking about it. There's a lot of nostalgia for that building. So right now we're in the first phase of the campaign, which is the planning of the document. Right now we're in the first phase of the capital campaign, which is creating the planning documents. So we've gotten seed money to hire an architect. Essentially, we're planning on making the building look like it did when it was built in 1912. And we've hired a museum planner to decide what, the layout and what exhibits are going to go in the building. We held a community workshop with 60 people attended. They all provided input to what they want to see in the building. So the renderings for these plans are just about done, and we'll be unveiling them later.
Fantastic. Doug, thank you so much for sharing all of that with all of us, including the worst kept secret that I think I just unveiled for more people. But what it did reveal, and our conversation revealed too, is that truly there are so many connections in your past, your experience, but also in this community, like the Minettis, sharing with you a resource that really is something that the Dune Center can use as an example, but so many connections that I think have enhanced and contributed to your success as the executive director. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.